The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty shooting range as Sarah Chen stepped out of her old sedan. She was 23 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in engineering and completely broke. The metal fence surrounding the range rattled in the warm breeze, and she could already hear the sharp cracks of gunfire echoing from inside. Her palms were sweating, but not from the heat. Today was the day she would ask for something that seemed impossible. Sarah had grown up in a small apartment above her parents' restaurant in the heart of the city. Money was always tight. Her father worked 16-hour days in the kitchen, while her mother served customers with a smile that never quite reached her tired eyes. They had sacrificed everything to send Sarah to university, believing education was the key to a better life. But graduation had come and gone 6 months ago, and the engineering job she had dreamed about remained just that. Dreams. Every application she sent disappeared into the void. Every interview ended with the same polite rejection. She walked through the entrance of the Riverside Shooting Club, a place she had discovered by accident 3 weeks earlier, while searching for any kind of work. The building was old, with peeling paint and a roof that probably leaked when it rained. Inside, the walls were decorated with faded photographs of past champions and tournament winners. The smell of gun oil and leather hung in the air. Behind the counter stood a large man with a gray beard and suspicious eyes. His name was Frank Morrison, and he was the owner. Sarah approached the counter, her heart pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times in her mind, but now all those carefully prepared words seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. Frank looked up from the magazine he was reading and gave her a quick once-over. She could see the doubt in his expression immediately. This was a man who had seen countless people walk through his doors, and he had learned to read them in seconds. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough like gravel under tires. Sarah took a deep breath and forced herself to speak. She told him she wanted to join the shooting team. Not as a hobby, not for fun, but as a competitor. She wanted to train seriously and represent the club in tournaments. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other in her nervousness. When she finished, there was silence. Frank stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had heard something absurd, something ridiculous. "You want to join the competitive team?" He repeated her words slowly, as if testing how silly they sounded when spoken aloud. "Have you ever even held a gun before?" Sarah admitted she had not. She had never touched a firearm in her life. Her parents would have been horrified by the very idea. But she had been researching for weeks, watching videos, reading everything she could find about competitive shooting. She explained that she was a fast learner, that she had excellent hand-eye coordination, that she was willing to work harder than anyone else. Frank's laughter died down, replaced by something worse than mockery: pity. He shook his head slowly and leaned back against the wall behind him. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice taking on a tone people use when explaining something to a child. "Competitive shooting is not something you just decide to do one day. These people have been training since they were old enough to hold a BB gun. They have expensive equipment, professional coaches, years of experience. And let me be honest with you, they're not going to take kindly to some girl showing up out of nowhere thinking she can just walk onto the team." The word girl stung more than Sarah wanted to admit. She had heard it before, spoken in that particular way as if her gender was a disability, but she kept her face neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She asked him what it would take. What would she need to do to prove herself? Frank sighed, clearly wanting this conversation to end. He told her that even if she trained every day for a year, she would still be nowhere near the level needed for competition. Then he added something that was meant to be final, meant to send her away for good. He said that if she could hit 100 targets in a row without a single miss, he would consider letting her train with the team. He emphasized the word consider, making it clear this was not a promise. It was a dismissal disguised as a challenge, an impossible task designed to make her realize how foolish her dream was. 100 targets without missing once. Even experienced shooters rarely achieved such perfection. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. It was not defeat. It was determination, pure and burning. She looked Frank directly in the eyes and asked how long she had to prepare. The question seemed to surprise him. He had expected her to walk away, to recognize the challenge for what it was, an elegant way of saying no. Instead, she was asking for details. Frank scratched his beard and shrugged. 3 months, he said, picking a number that seemed generous enough to make him look fair while still being completely unrealistic. 3 months to become good enough to hit 100 targets without missing. 3 months to master a skill that took others years to develop. 3 months to prove that she was not just another naive kid with impossible dreams. Sarah nodded once, thanked him for his time, and turned to leave. As she walked toward the door, she heard Frank call after her. "You'll need to pay for range time and ammunition," he said. "This isn't charity." She nodded again without turning around. She would figure it out somehow. Outside, Sarah sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was excitement mixed with terror, the feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump anyway. She had no money for training. She had no experience. She had no support. But she had 3 months, and she had something Frank had not seen in her eyes. She had nothing left to lose. Sometimes that is the most dangerous kind of person to underestimate. The first week was brutal in ways Sarah had not anticipated. She picked up 2 part-time jobs, one washing dishes at a diner from 5 in the morning until noon, and another stocking shelves at a grocery store from 7 at night until midnight. The hours in between belonged to the shooting range. She had calculated her budget down to the last dollar. After rent and food, she could afford exactly 90 minutes of range time per day and 2 boxes of ammunition. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. Sarah told no one about her goal. Not her parents, who would worry and try to talk her out of it. Not her college friends, who had all moved on to careers and relationships and normal adult lives. This was something she needed to do alone. On her second day at the range, Frank had given her a look of surprise when she showed up. By the 5th day, his expression had changed to something closer to curiosity. By the end of the second week, he stopped commenting altogether and just took her money without a word. The gun felt foreign in her hands at first, heavy and dangerous and completely wrong. Her first attempts at shooting were embarrassing. She missed the target entirely more often than she hit it. The recoil surprised her every time, jerking her arms up and making her shots go wild. Other shooters at the range would glance over at her, some with amusement, others with annoyance at the obvious beginner taking up space. Sarah felt their eyes on her like weights pressing down, making everything harder, but she refused to quit. Every evening after her shift at the grocery store ended, she would go home to her tiny studio apartment and watch videos of professional shooters. She studied their stance, the way they held their weapons, how they breathed, how they moved. She took notes in a worn notebook, filling pages with observations and tips. Then she would practice the movements without a gun, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, perfecting her posture, training her muscles to remember the correct positions. The breakthrough came in her 3rd week. Sarah was at the range during the afternoon, her arms aching from the morning shift at the diner. She had been missing more than usual, her frustration building with each failed shot. Then an older man approached her. His name was Henry, and he was at least 70 years old with white hair and gentle eyes. He had been watching her struggle for days. "You're gripping too tight," he said simply. "You are fighting the gun instead of working with it." Henry spent the next hour teaching her, and he refused to accept any payment. He showed her how to relax her shoulders, how to let the weapon become an extension of her arm rather than something she was wrestling with. He taught her about breathing, about finding the space between heartbeats where everything goes still. Most importantly, he taught her about patience. Shooting is not about speed, he explained. It is about consistency. It is about making the same perfect motion 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times until you do not even think about it anymore. Something clicked in Sarah's mind that day. She stopped trying to force results and started focusing on the process. Instead of counting how many targets she hit, she counted how many times she performed the correct motion. Instead of getting angry at misses, she analyzed what went wrong and adjusted. Slowly, painfully slowly, she began to improve. By the end of the 4th week, she could hit the target more often than she missed it. By the end of the 6th week, she was hitting the center of the target regularly, but hitting targets consistently was not the same as hitting 100 in a row. That was a completely different challenge. It required not just skill but incredible mental discipline. One moment of distraction, one tiny error in form, one fraction of a second where her focus wavered and the streak would end. She started doing meditation exercises she found online, training her mind to stay present, to not drift forward into worry about future shots or backward into regret about missed ones. Her body was exhausted all the time. Working 2 jobs and training every day left her running on fumes and coffee. She lost weight she could not afford to lose. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her hands developed calluses from gripping the gun and from scrubbing dishes. Sometimes she would fall asleep standing up during her grocery store shift, snapping awake when a box slipped from her fingers. But she kept going. The 3-month deadline was approaching like a train in the distance, getting closer and louder every day. Around the 2-month mark, something unexpected happened. Other regulars at the range began to notice her improvement. The same people who had smirked at her early attempts were now watching with something resembling respect. Henry continued to offer guidance when he was there, but increasingly Sarah found her own answers. She developed an instinct for shooting, an ability to feel when something was off before she even pulled the trigger. Her accuracy climbed to 70%, then 80%, then 90%. But 90% was not good enough. If she missed 10 out of every 100 shots, she would fail Frank's challenge. She needed perfection or something close to it. Sarah started keeping detailed records of every session, noting what time of day she shot best, what she had eaten, how much sleep she had gotten, even what the weather was like. She was treating this like a science experiment, gathering data, looking for patterns, optimizing every variable she could control. One night, exhausted after a particularly difficult shift at the diner where she had burned her hand on a hot pan, Sarah sat on the floor of her apartment and cried. Not because she wanted to quit, but because she was so tired and the goal still seemed impossibly far away. She thought about Frank's laugh, about the way he had said the word girl, about all the people who had underestimated her throughout her life. She thought about her parents working themselves to exhaustion for decades, always hoping for something better that never came. She thought about the engineering degree gathering dust while she washed dishes and stocked shelves. Then she dried her tears, stood up, and went back to her practice routine. She stood in front of the mirror and went through the motions 50 times before allowing herself to sleep. Because that is what you do when you have nothing left except determination. You keep going. You do the work even when it feels pointless, even when success seems impossible, even when every rational voice in your head is screaming that you should give up. You keep going because the only thing worse than failing would be quitting, without ever knowing what you were capable of achieving. By the end of the 10th week, Sarah could hit 95 targets out of 100 consistently. She was close, so agonizingly close, but close was not enough. The remaining 5% haunted her. She would have perfect streaks of 40, 50, even 60 shots, and then one would go wide for no reason she could identify. It was maddening. Frank had noticed her progress too. He no longer looked at her with pity or amusement. Now there was something else in his expression, something harder to read. Maybe it was concern that he might actually have to keep his word. The 11th week brought unexpected complications. Sarah arrived at the diner for her morning shift to find a note on the door. The restaurant was closing permanently. The owner had declared bankruptcy, and just like that, half of Sarah's income disappeared. She stood in the empty parking lot, still wearing her apron from a shift that would never happen, and felt panic rising in her chest like cold water. She needed that money for ammunition and range time. Without it, she could not continue training. For 2 days, she applied everywhere she could think of, desperately searching for another early morning job. But the city was not kind to people who needed work immediately. Every place wanted her to start the following week, or wanted references she did not have or was not hiring at all. Her savings, already thin, would last maybe another 10 days if she was extremely careful. After that, she would have to choose between eating and training. The deadline was only 3 weeks away. Sarah made a decision that terrified her. She went to her parents' restaurant during the dinner rush and asked if she could borrow money. Her mother's face fell the moment she heard the request. Her father came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, his expression worried. They sat her down at a corner table and asked what was wrong. Sarah had not meant to tell them about the shooting range, about the challenge, about any of it. But once she started talking, everything poured out. The whole strange, desperate story of the past 2.5 months. Her parents listened in silence. When she finished, her father spoke first. His voice was quiet and sad. He told her that they did not have money to lend. The restaurant was barely surviving. They were already behind on 3 months of rent for the building. Her mother reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "What is this really about?" Sarah tried to explain about the engineering jobs that never came, about feeling useless and lost, about needing to prove she could accomplish something difficult. But the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Her mother shook her head slowly. "This is not a career," she said. "This is not a future. Shooting guns, this is not why we sacrificed so you could go to university." Her father added that they were worried about her. She looked thin and exhausted. They had heard she was working 2 jobs but never had time to visit them anymore. "You are throwing your life away on something crazy," her mother said. And Sarah could see tears forming in her eyes. "Please stop this and find a real job. Use your degree. This shooting thing, it is a waste of time." The words hit Sarah harder than any criticism from Frank or any mocking look from other shooters. These were her parents, the people who had given up everything for her, and they thought she was wasting her life. She left the restaurant feeling worse than when she had arrived. Not only did she not have money, but now she carried the weight of her parents' disappointment as well. That night she lay awake in her apartment staring at the ceiling, wondering if they were right. Was she chasing something pointless? Was this just pride and stubbornness disguised as determination? The next morning she almost did not go to the range. She was getting ready for her evening shift at the grocery store when she noticed her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked terrible, thinner than she had ever been, with exhaustion written across every feature of her face. But she also saw something else. In her eyes there was a fierceness that had not been there 3 months ago. She thought about the girl who had walked into the shooting range for the first time, terrified and broke and desperate for any kind of purpose. That girl had become someone different, someone stronger. Sarah made a decision. She would sell her laptop, the one luxury she owned, the computer she had used throughout college. It was worth enough to buy her another week of ammunition and range time. After that, if she still could not hit 100 targets, she would accept defeat. But she would not quit before trying everything possible. She posted the laptop online that afternoon and sold it within hours to a college student who paid in cash. The money felt heavy in her pocket, weighted with finality. With only 2 weeks remaining until the deadline, Sarah's training took on a desperate intensity. She was at the range every possible moment, shooting until her arms trembled with fatigue. Henry noticed the change in her and pulled her aside one afternoon. "You are pushing too hard," he warned. "I can see it in your shooting. You are tense, forcing things. That is when mistakes happen." But Sarah could not slow down. Time was running out like sand through her fingers. Her accuracy began to slip. The stress was affecting her performance in exactly the way Henry had predicted. She started missing shots she would have made easily a week earlier. One afternoon, she only managed to hit 82 targets out of 100, her worst performance in a month. She left the range that day feeling defeated, convinced she had wasted 3 months and all her money on an impossible dream. As she sat in her car, she allowed herself to imagine what would happen when she failed. She would go back to her parents, apologize, and beg for forgiveness. She would take any job she could find and forget this whole foolish episode. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. She woke up feeling different, lighter somehow. The crushing pressure she had been carrying seemed less heavy. Maybe it was acceptance of likely failure, or maybe it was exhaustion finally breaking through to some deeper level of calm. Whatever the cause, when she went to the range that afternoon, her shooting transformed. She was not trying to force perfection anymore. She was simply shooting, letting each shot be what it was without judgment or anxiety about what came next. She hit 47 targets in a row before missing. Then, after resetting, she hit 63 straight. The next day, she made it to 71 before a shot went wide. She was getting closer, but close was still not enough. Frank had been watching her recent sessions, and she could see concern in his expression now. The 3-month deadline was 1 week away. She suspected he was hoping she would give up before then, that he would not actually have to witness her failure or, worse from his perspective, her success. On the second to last day before the deadline, something happened that changed everything. Sarah was at the range in the afternoon, working through her usual routine when a group of men arrived. They were members of the competitive shooting team, the very team Sarah hoped to join. They were loud and confident, with expensive equipment and the easy manner of people who had never doubted their place in the world. Frank greeted them warmly and they began setting up at the premium lanes. One of them noticed Sarah and made a comment to his friends. She could not hear exactly what he said, but she heard the laughter that followed. Then he walked over to her lane. His name was Derek, and he introduced himself with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Frank tells me you are trying to join the team," he said, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "That is cute. How is that going for you?" Sarah kept her eyes on her target and said it was going fine. Derek laughed and told her that competitive shooting was serious business. "We cannot have people joining just because they think it might be fun," he said. "It takes real talent, years of dedication. Not just anyone can do this." Sarah finally looked at him directly. "I know," she said quietly. Derek seemed disappointed by her calm response. He had been hoping to provoke a reaction. He shrugged and started to walk away, then turned back. "Good luck tomorrow," he called out, and the way he said it made clear he meant the opposite. After he left, Sarah stood at her lane for a long moment, the gun heavy in her hands, feeling the weight of every doubt and every dismissal she had faced over the past 3 months. Tomorrow was the day. Tomorrow she would either achieve something extraordinary or fail spectacularly in front of everyone who had mocked her. Sarah did not sleep the night before the challenge. She lay in bed watching shadows move across her ceiling, her mind replaying every shot she had ever taken, every mistake she had made, every moment of progress. At 4 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely and sat by her window watching the city slowly wake up. Workers heading to early shifts, delivery trucks making their rounds, the gradual transition from night to dawn. She thought about how much her life had changed in 3 months, how focused she had become on this single goal. She arrived at the range at 8 o'clock sharp, an hour before it officially opened. Frank was already there, unlocking the doors, and he showed no surprise at seeing her early. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice neutral, impossible to read. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her stomach was twisted in knots and her hands were shaking slightly. Frank let her in and told her to take her time getting set up. The attempt would begin at 9 o'clock, giving her an hour to prepare mentally. The hour passed both too quickly and too slowly. Sarah went through her warm-up routine, the movements she had practiced thousands of times. She tried to empty her mind of expectations, of fear, of everything except the present moment. But it was impossible. This moment carried too much weight. At 5 minutes to 9, Frank called out that it was almost time. Sarah took her position at the lane, loading the weapon with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Whatever happened next, she had given everything she had to this challenge. Then the door to the range opened, and people started filing in. Sarah felt her heart sink. Frank had invited the competitive shooting team to watch. There was Derek, wearing an expression of smug anticipation, clearly expecting to witness her failure. There were 5 other team members, all men, all wearing matching team jackets that seemed designed to emphasize that Sarah was an outsider. Henry was there too, giving her an encouraging nod. And in the back, looking uncomfortable and out of place, were her parents. Sarah felt a rush of emotion seeing them. Her mother looked worried and her father looked sad, but they had come. Despite their disapproval, despite thinking this was a waste of time, they had come to support her. Frank explained the rules clearly, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. 100 targets, 100 shots, 0 misses allowed. If she hit 99 and missed the 100th, she failed. There would be no do-overs, no second chances. This was it. He asked if she understood, and Sarah said yes. Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. Frank stepped back and told her to begin whenever she was ready. The room fell silent. Even Derek stopped smirking. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen. Sarah took a deep breath and raised the weapon. The first shot felt like it took forever. She went through every step of her routine, checking her stance, controlling her breathing, finding that still space between heartbeats. The gun fired, and the target showed a perfect hit. 1 down, 99 to go. The second shot came easier, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought would only create doubt. Another hit. She fell into a rhythm, each shot flowing into the next like a meditation. 10 shots. 20 shots. 30 shots. Not a single miss. At 40 shots, something unexpected happened. Her concentration wavered for just a moment. She became aware again of the people watching, of the pressure of what was at stake. The weapon felt suddenly heavy in her hands. She lowered it carefully and stepped back from the lane. Everyone stirred, thinking she was giving up, but she was just resetting her mind. Henry had taught her this. When you feel yourself losing focus, stop. Take a moment. Start again fresh. She closed her eyes, took 3 deep breaths, and stepped back to the lane. 41 shots, 42, 43. The rhythm returned. At 50 shots halfway through the challenge, Derek made a comment to one of his teammates. It was said quietly, but Sarah heard it clearly in the silent range. "She will choke," he said. "They always do." Sarah felt anger flash through her, hot and sharp. She wanted to turn around and tell him exactly what she thought of him, and his arrogance and his belief that she did not belong here. But she did not. Because that is what he wanted. He wanted to distract her, to break her concentration, to prove his prediction correct. Instead, she channeled that anger into focus. 51, 52, 53. Each shot became a response to every person who had ever doubted her. At 70 shots, her arms began to ache. This was expected. She had trained for this, building up her endurance specifically for this moment. But knowing it was coming did not make it easier. The weapon seemed to gain weight with each shot. Her shoulders burned. Her hands felt cramped around the grip. She wanted to rest, to lower the gun, to stretch out the tension building in her muscles. But she knew if she stopped again, she might not be able to recapture the rhythm. So she kept going, accepting the pain as part of the process. 71, 72, 73. At 80 shots, something shifted in the room. The mockery and skepticism that had filled the air earlier had transformed into something else. Tension, anticipation. Even Derek had stopped making comments. People were watching now with genuine interest, perhaps even hope, though Sarah was too focused to notice or care. Her entire world had narrowed down to the target in front of her, to the weight of the weapon in her hands, to the precise movements required for each perfect shot. Nothing else existed. Not the pain in her arms, not the audience, not even the count. Just her and the target and the space between heartbeats where everything became still. At 90 shots, her mother started crying. Sarah heard the quiet sound and felt her concentration waver dangerously. She wanted to turn around to see her parents' faces to know what they were thinking, but she did not. She could not. There would be time for that later after this was finished one way or another. 91, 92, 93, 10 shots remaining. 10 perfect shots between her and proving everyone wrong. 10 shots between this moment and validation of 3 months of sacrifice and exhaustion and determination. At 95 shots, her hands were shaking badly from fatigue. Every competitive shooter in the room knew what was happening. The final shots were always the hardest because the body was exhausted, and the mind was screaming about how close you were to either success or failure. This was where mental discipline mattered more than physical skill. This was where people choked just like Derek had predicted. 96. Sarah's vision blurred for a moment. She blinked hard, clearing her eyes, refusing to let her body betray her this close to the goal. 97. 98. 2 shots left. The silence in the range was absolute. No one was breathing. Sarah could feel the weight of every eye on her back, could sense the collective tension of everyone waiting to see what would happen. Her arms were trembling now, the weapon wavering slightly despite her best efforts to hold it steady. She had never made it this far in practice. 98 was her record. Everything beyond this point was unknown territory. She could feel doubt creeping in like cold fog, whispering that she had gotten lucky, that this next shot would be the one where her luck ran out. She closed her eyes for just a second, not to pray or hope, but to remember why she was here. She thought about her parents working themselves to exhaustion. She thought about feeling lost and useless after graduation. She thought about Frank's dismissive laugh and Derek's condescending smile. She thought about every time someone had made her feel small, had suggested she should aim lower, should be realistic, should accept that some things were not meant for people like her. Then she opened her eyes and raised the weapon one more time. The 99th shot felt like it happened in slow motion. Sarah went through each step of her routine with deliberate precision, refusing to rush despite the screaming tension in the room. Stance perfect. Breathing controlled. Vision clear. She found that still space between heartbeats, the place where doubt could not reach her. The gun fired. The target showed a hit. 99 out of 99. 1 shot remaining. One final shot between her and something she had been told was impossible. Sarah lowered the weapon for a moment, not to rest, but to fully absorb where she was. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 3 months of sacrifice, of exhaustion, of doubt and determination, and desperate hope all converging on this single shot. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Her arms felt like they were made of lead. Every muscle in her body was screaming for her to stop. But she was so close now, so impossibly close. She raised the weapon one final time. The target seemed both very far away and impossibly near. She went through her routine again, each movement automatic after thousands of repetitions, but as she was about to fire, her concentration broke. She suddenly became aware of everything around her. The sound of someone shifting their weight, the faint smell of gun oil, the weight of all those eyes watching. Her parents, the team members, Frank, Henry, all of them waiting to see if she would succeed or fail at this final moment. The pressure crashed down on her like a physical weight. Sarah lowered the weapon again. She heard Derek make a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sigh. He thought she was choking, proving him right. But Sarah was doing something different. She was accepting something she had been fighting against for 3 months. The truth was she could not control what happened next. She could do everything right and still miss. She could perform the perfect motion and still have the shot go wide by a fraction of an inch. Control was an illusion. The only thing she could control was her effort, her focus, her commitment to the process. The outcome was beyond her grasp, and somehow accepting that made everything easier. The pressure did not disappear, but it transformed into something else. Not a weight pressing down, but an energy she could use. She was not shooting to prove anything to Frank or Derek or even her parents. She was shooting because this was who she had become, someone who attempted impossible things, someone who gave everything to a goal even when success seemed impossible. Whether this final shot hit or missed, she had already accomplished something extraordinary. She had transformed herself from a lost, desperate girl into someone with purpose and skill and unshakable determination. With that thought settling into her mind like calm water, Sarah raised the weapon for the last time. Her hands were steady now. Her breathing was controlled. Her vision was clear. She went through the routine one final time, each step flowing into the next like a dance she had learned so well that her body performed it without conscious thought. She found the space between heartbeats. The world went quiet and still, and she fired. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Sarah stood frozen, the weapon still raised, afraid to look at the target, afraid to see the result. Then she heard a sound that made her heart soar. It was Henry shouting with joy. Then other voices joining in, an eruption of noise that shattered the tense silence. Sarah finally lowered the weapon and looked at the target. 100 hits. 100 shots without a single miss. She had done it. Against every odd. Despite every doubt, she had actually done it. Her legs went weak and she had to lean against the lane divider to keep from falling. The exhaustion that she had been holding back crashed over her like a wave. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now that it was over. She felt tears running down her face, though she could not remember when she had started crying. Henry was suddenly beside her, pulling her into a hug, telling her he knew she could do it, that he had never doubted her. But Sarah could barely hear him over the roaring in her ears. Then her parents were there, and her mother was crying and laughing at the same time, touching Sarah's face like she needed to confirm her daughter was real. Her father wrapped his arms around both of them and Sarah could feel him trembling. "I am sorry," her mother whispered. "I am sorry we doubted you. I am sorry we did not understand." Sarah shook her head, unable to speak, overwhelmed by emotion. There was nothing to forgive. They had been protecting her the only way they knew how, trying to shield her from disappointment. But Sarah had needed to risk disappointment to discover what she was capable of achieving. Frank approached slowly, and the noise in the range died down. Everyone turned to look at him, waiting to see what he would say. Sarah pulled away from her parents and faced him, suddenly nervous again despite what she had just accomplished. Frank looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he held out his hand. "Welcome to the team," he said simply. His voice was gruff, but there was something in his eyes that looked like respect, possibly even admiration. Sarah shook his hand and the room erupted in applause. Not everyone was applauding. Derek and a few of his teammates stood apart, looking shocked and uncomfortable. Sarah caught Derek's eye across the room, and something passed between them. It was not friendship or even respect, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. She had earned the right to be here, whether he liked it or not. She had done something he had believed was impossible, and he could not dismiss or mock her anymore. The rules had changed and he was going to have to accept it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People kept congratulating Sarah, shaking her hand, asking how she had trained, wanting to know her story. Henry introduced her to other shooters, many of whom admitted they had been skeptical but were impressed by what they had witnessed. Frank gave her a schedule for team practices, explained what tournaments were coming up, discussed what equipment she would need. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of something bigger than herself. That evening, Sarah sat with her parents at their restaurant after closing time. The three of them shared a simple meal at the same corner table where, just weeks earlier, her mother had told her this shooting thing was a waste of time. Now they sat in comfortable silence, processing everything that had happened. Finally, her father spoke. "I do not understand this thing you do," he said slowly. "This shooting. It is strange to me. But watching you today, I saw something I recognize. I saw the same thing I felt when I first opened this restaurant. The determination to build something from nothing. To prove you can succeed when others say you will fail." Her mother added, "We have been wrong about many things. We thought the engineering degree was the only path. We thought anything else was wasting your education. But maybe we have been thinking too small. Maybe there are many ways to build a life." She reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "You scared us. You pushed yourself so hard we were afraid you would break. But you did not break. You became stronger. I am proud of you. Even if I do not understand it, I am proud." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but she blinked them back. "I do not know where this leads," she admitted. "I do not know if I can make a career out of competitive shooting. Maybe I will still need to use my engineering degree someday. But for now, I need to see where this path takes me. I need to find out what else I'm capable of." Her parents nodded, accepting this. It was not the future they had imagined for their daughter, but it was hers, and they would support her however they could. The altitude indicator climbed steadily as Elena guided the old interceptor through layers of thin clouds. Below her, the landscape transformed into a miniature world of browns and greens. Rivers looked like silver threads winding through valleys. The other jets from her squadron had already raced ahead, their superior speed allowing them to reach the patrol zone first. Elena didn't try to keep up with them. She knew this aircraft couldn't match their velocity in a straight race. Instead, she focused on the feel of the controls and the sound of the engines. Every vibration told her something about how the jet was performing. The left engine was indeed running hotter, just as Rodriguez had warned. She made a mental note and adjusted her fuel mixture slightly. The radio chatter increased as the squadron approached the border zone. The newer jets had their radar systems active, sweeping the sky for any sign of enemy aircraft. Their computers processed hundreds of data points every second, looking for threats. Elena's radar was far simpler. It showed basic information but lacked the sophisticated tracking features of modern systems. She climbed higher, pushing the old jet toward its maximum ceiling. The air grew thinner and the temperature dropped. Frost began forming at the edges of her canopy. Most pilots stayed at medium altitudes where their jets performed best. But Elena had a different plan forming in her mind. Sometimes the oldest tactics worked precisely because everyone had forgotten about them. The first warning came from one of the forward scouts. Enemy fighters had been detected approaching fast from the east. The squadron leader ordered everyone into defensive positions. Pilots began maneuvering their jets into the formations they had practiced countless times. Computer systems linked the aircraft together, allowing them to share targeting data and coordinate their attacks. Elena stayed high and alone. The squadron leader called her position twice, asking why she wasn't joining the formation. She responded calmly that she was maintaining an overwatch position. It wasn't exactly true, but it bought her time to execute the plan that was crystallizing in her mind. Through her canopy, she could see the contrails of the approaching enemy fighters. They were moving incredibly fast, just as intelligence had predicted. These weren't ordinary pilots or standard aircraft. The enemy had invested heavily in developing jets that could outrun and outmaneuver anything they faced. Their success rate in recent engagements proved how effective they were. The enemy jets split into two groups as they approached. It was a classic pincer movement designed to catch defending aircraft in a crossfire. Elena watched as her squadron tried to counter, breaking their formation to avoid being trapped. Individual dogfights began erupting across the sky as jets twisted and turned, each pilot trying to gain advantage over their opponent. The newer jets from her squadron had better acceleration and could pull tighter turns than Elena's old aircraft. But the enemy jets were still faster and more agile. She watched as one of her squadron mates fired missiles that the enemy easily evaded with electronic countermeasures and sharp maneuvers. The technology everyone had relied on wasn't providing the expected advantage. Elena kept her old jet high above the chaos. She shut down her radar to avoid being detected. Without the radar active, enemy jets wouldn't see her as easily on their sensors. This was a technique from decades ago, before everyone assumed radar would always be running. She relied on her eyes instead, scanning the sky and tracking the movement of the fight below. One enemy pilot was clearly more skilled than the others. His jet moved through the air like it was alive, anticipating the moves of his opponents before they made them. He had already damaged one aircraft from Elena's squadron badly enough that the pilot had to break off and head back to base. Now this enemy ace was pursuing another one of her teammates. The pursuit was leading them in Elena's direction, though neither pilot realized it yet. The enemy was so focused on his target that he wasn't checking his high position. This was the moment Elena had been waiting for. She pushed her throttles forward and angled the old jet into a steep dive. Gravity and engine power combined to accelerate the interceptor far beyond its normal maximum speed. The airframe shuddered as it exceeded its design limits. Warning lights began flashing on the instrument panel, but Elena ignored them. Rodriguez had told her this jet was stronger than the specifications suggested. Decades of repairs and modifications had actually reinforced parts of the structure. She dove like a hawk dropping on prey. The old jet screamed through the air, picking up speed with every second. The wind resistance made the controls heavy, requiring all her strength to make adjustments. Her G-suit inflated, squeezing her legs and abdomen to keep blood flowing to her brain as the forces increased. The enemy ace finally noticed her, but too late. His jet was already at maximum speed trying to catch Elena's teammate. He couldn't accelerate anymore, and his turn radius at that velocity was too wide to evade effectively. Elena's ancient targeting system struggled to lock on, the computers processing data far slower than modern equivalents. She didn't wait for a perfect lock. Experience told her where to aim. Her fingers squeezed the trigger and cannon rounds tore through the sky. The old jet carried a weapon that newer aircraft had abandoned in favor of missiles. But cannons had no electronic signature to detect and no countermeasures could stop them. The enemy jet took hits along its wing and engine section. Smoke began pouring from the damaged aircraft as the pilot fought to maintain control. He had no choice but to break off his attack and turn away, desperately trying to nurse his crippled jet back to friendly territory. Elena's squadron mate escaped, his voice coming over the radio with a mixture of shock and gratitude. He hadn't even known Elena was there until she appeared like a ghost from above. The other enemy pilots saw what happened to their ace and suddenly became more cautious. They weren't invincible after all.